Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. I slammed my fist into the wall, harder than I meant to. The drywall gave a little, leaving a shallow dent. My knuckles sang with pain, but all I could see was that screen. My wife's laptop, the folder labeled invoices wide open. One glance, and it felt like the whole floor dropped out from under me. I heard my breath catch in my throat. There was a time, years back, when I broke my wrist sliding into third base. That was a clean, sharp pain. This felt different. Numb. Slow. Like I was floating just outside my own body, watching a grown man do something reckless, something I never thought I'd do. I stared at the wall, breathing in the dust motes swirling through a beam of afternoon light. In that frozen moment, I couldn't have told you what day it was. Time. It's the enemy of every relationship, isn't it? Day by day, it chips away at the surface until cracks appear. We plaster them, paint over them, pretend they're not there. But the cracks never leave. They deepen in secret, waiting for the slightest pressure to break everything apart. I think we both knew the cracks were there, me and Becky. We just never imagined how easily one push would cave in the whole structure. She'd left her laptop open. I don't know if it was laziness, arrogance, or just plain oversight. She'd walked out the door saying she had errands to run. And then I saw the screensaver flicker off, revealing the simple, unlabeled window. A folder called Invoices, one she'd never mentioned. The kind of thing that might not raise suspicion. Everyone's got some random files stashed away. But something about the date it was last opened caught my eye. I clicked. And just like that, my life cracked open too. Inside, there were pictures, hundreds, maybe. Some fairly tame, her leaning against the passenger door of a truck I recognized as Jerry's, smiling, hair blowing across her face in the late sunlight. Then others more explicit, each new image worse than the last. I saw her bareback, the silhouette of Jerry's arms around her, the bed of his truck, the farm road in the background. Her eyes were half shut in one picture, full grin in another. The kind of grin she never flashed at me, not for at least a decade. My eyes scanned them, refusing to blink, wanting to close but unable. A cold wave rose in my chest, a rush that made me feel both hot and icy at the same time. A new wave of rage had me slam the wall again, though more gently than the first time. This time I felt the vibration up my forearm. The house was silent. Our daughter was at a friend's for a sleepover. Becky was God knows where, probably with him, if I had to guess. She'd used the excuse of helping Jerry fix his well. An ongoing project that never seemed to end. I used to believe it. I guess I wanted to believe it, because if I started asking questions, that would have forced me to see all those cracks. I closed the laptop. There was a part of me screaming to yank out the power cord and fling the thing across the room, but I forced my hand steady. The images burned into my mind. Becky, wearing that purple sundress she reserved for special occasions, lying face down on the truck bed, with Jerry behind her. The angle was unmistakable. The expression on her face was of unguarded pleasure, something I hadn't seen in, I couldn't even remember. A decade, maybe longer. And that was the worst part. There was no anger in her eyes, no shame, just delight, like she wanted the camera to capture it. In the distance, a door slammed. Some neighbor finishing yard work, I guess. I stood there, blinking, trying to draw breath. It felt like I was under deep water, arms and legs weighed down. Time passing, slow. A bubble of numb guilt rose in me. Why guilt? Maybe I believed that if she was so happy in someone else's arms, I must have failed her somehow. Rationally, I knew I wasn't the one sneaking around. But emotion doesn't care about logic. I felt guilty for not being enough, for letting my marriage slip into routine and silence. Time was the enemy, and it beat me. I must have spent half an hour just standing there, hand on the laptop lid, thinking about the first time Becky and I kissed, back in high school behind the bleachers. It was March, cold enough that our breath turned to vapor. I remember how she pressed close to me for warmth, laughing because I was trembling so badly, though whether from nerves or the chill, I don't know. That was 1,000 years ago, or so it felt. Now, I was trembling all over again, but there was no laughter, no warmth. I heard the front door open. Her footsteps were light, almost hesitant. I kept my eyes on the far wall, half expecting her to call my name. She didn't. The quiet told me she was probably tiptoeing. We had that kind of hush between us lately, like we'd forgotten how to fill the space with normal conversation. My throat was tight. If I tried to speak, I wasn't sure what might erupt. Becky must have felt the tension in the air, because she paused in the hallway, keys jangling in her hand. I turned around slowly, and she startled. "Oh," was all she said, a little squeak. Then she looked at me, at my hand, at the dent in the wall. She parted her lips like she might ask something, but I beat her to it. "Don't," I said. Just that one word, with all the force I could muster. She closed her mouth. Behind her, the setting sun cast a pale glow. She looked smaller in that light, like she was shrinking under my stare. For a second, I wanted to feel pity for her. Then I remembered the pictures and felt something like an Iron Man clamp around my chest. I tightened my jaw and made a move for the stairs, brushing past her. Becky reached out, maybe to touch my arm, but I shook her off. She said my name quietly. "Michael." I gave a half shake of my head, never meeting her eyes. "Don't," I repeated, voice cracking. Then I climbed the stairs, 2 at a time, like I was running from a fire behind me. Door, darkness, another space. The bedroom. We'd shared this room for years. I painted the walls a soft gray when we first bought the house. She picked the curtains, white with small blue flowers. I remember I made a joke about them looking like hospital drapes. She got mad, then we both laughed it off. Now the curtains glowed faintly in the last light of day, and everything else was cast in shadows. It felt cold in there. Fitting, I guess. I sat on the edge of the bed. It smelled like her shampoo, that citrus vanilla scent she loved. A wave of revulsion went through me. I wanted to run outside, but I couldn't move. I heard the faint clang of dishes in the kitchen. She was probably putting away groceries or something equally ordinary. That was Becky. Avoid the confrontation. Fill the silence with chores. Everything about our life felt like a place setting. Forks on the left, knives on the right, napkins folded neatly, perfectly staged. Meanwhile, the center was rotting. I must have dozed off sitting there, because I jerked awake at some point to find darkness outside the window. Becky hadn't come up. Maybe she was in the living room, or maybe she'd gone to our daughter's bedroom. Not that it was occupied. Our daughter was at a friend's house for the weekend, meaning we had this empty house to ourselves. Perfect setting for a confrontation, right? But that confrontation never came that night. I changed into sweatpants, got under the covers, and stared at the ceiling. Each passing minute felt like a knife twist. In my mind, those images looped over and over. Becky pressed against Jerry's truck, his arm around her waist, that Dan grin on his face. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might suffocate. Then I forced myself to breathe. Time is an enemy. It doesn't heal all wounds. It just slides forward, indifferent, while you bleed. The next morning, I expected her to say something. Maybe come clean, maybe deny it, maybe try to shift blame. Instead, she was eerily quiet. I got up early, put on a pot of coffee. The sweet smell filled the kitchen, a hollow comfort. I felt her presence behind me before she spoke. How'd you sleep?" she asked softly. I stared into the steam rising from the mug, gave a short laugh. "Fine." It sounded harsh. My voice nearly cracked again, so I bit my tongue. She cleared her throat. "I have to go help Jerry with that well again. He called early, said he needs." I let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a cough and a scoff. She stopped mid-sentence. "Don't." I said for the third time in less than 24 hours. Then I took my coffee and walked out the back door, letting the screen slam behind me. Outside, the sun was just creeping over the horizon, lighting up the dew on the grass. The sky had that faded pink hue you only get in the Midwest at dawn. My mind felt slow, like I was moving through Syrah. I sipped coffee, tried to collect my thoughts. The idea of her heading over to see him again so soon, after I'd clearly discovered those photos, was enough to make me wonder if I was living in a dream. But in a twisted way, it also confirmed everything. She was neck-deep in this affair. And apparently, she didn't want to hide it anymore. I wanted to drag over there, make a scene, challenge Jerry to come out of his garage, see how tough he really was. But I didn't move. There was a weird calmness. The rage was still there, pulsing under the surface, but bigger than that was a sense of finality. A chilling kind of acceptance. Becky left. I watched from the kitchen window as she climbed into our sit-in and pulled out of the driveway. I noticed she'd changed into that same purple sundress. My knuckles went white around my coffee mug. Later, I found myself wandering around the house, noticing all these small details. Pictures of us on the mantel, the floral arrangement she bought last week, the hamper with her clothes. Every single thing felt like a lie, like she was staging an advertisement for a life we didn't actually live. I paced into the living room, saw her laptop still sitting on the end table, power light blinking. My body moved before my brain could object. I opened it again, entered her password, our wedding anniversary year. I shook my head at that. So easy, so brazen. This time, I dug deeper. I wanted to find any clue I could about how long this had been going on. Emails, text logs, anything. I discovered messages going back almost a year of secrets. A year of her telling Jerry how lonely she felt, how she needed excitement. One message read, "Time is slipping away from me, Jer. I don't want to wake up at 60 and realize I never lived." My mouth twisted in disgust. Another gem. "Michael's a good man, but he's so steady. There's no spark. I need spark." I swallowed a lump in my throat. That false guilt again, telling me it was my fault for not providing enough spark. My eyes jumped to a more recent exchange from just last week. "We should talk about the DNA test soon." My heart lurched. DNA test. Then I saw the follow-up. "Becky, I'm afraid Michael's suspicious. Our daughter has Jerry's hair color, not his. He's going to find out eventually." My grip tightened on the laptop until the plastic creaked. My breath whooshed out. Nausea crept into my stomach. So it wasn't just an affair. She was worried about paternity. My mother's eyes. That phrase haunted me from the day our daughter was born. Everyone said she had my mother's eyes. In reality, maybe not. I forced myself to keep reading. Another message. "He doesn't suspect. He's too busy with work, and I'll handle it if he starts asking questions." Jerry's reply. "Cool. Let me know if you need me to do anything." Casual, like they were coordinating a grocery run. I slammed the laptop shut again, nearly throwing it. My breath came hard, my palms slick with sweat. It felt like my entire body was trembling. I needed air. I left the house, not bothering to lock up, and walked down the street. Door. Darkness. Another space. Time blurred. I must have walked for an hour, maybe more. The houses all looked the same. Tidy lawns, front porches, American flags fluttering. I was vaguely aware of neighbors driving by, giving me a wave, but I didn't wave back. I reached a park on the edge of town, the one with the little pond where I sometimes fish on weekends. I sat down on a bench, head in my hands. This swirling mixture of guilt, anger, and sorrow beat at me. The images wouldn't leave my mind. All the lies, the messages, the possibility that my daughter might not be mine. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a shuddering sigh. The next days passed in a haze. Becky and I coexisted in the same house, but we barely spoke. She tried to say something about groceries. about bills. But I cut her off. Just do whatever, I'd mutter, and vanish into the garage or out the front door. She didn't push. Maybe she was terrified I'd explode. Maybe she hoped I'd never confront her, so she could keep living in denial. Me? I started telling people, quietly, discreetly, that something was wrong. We had mutual friends at church around the neighborhood. I never revealed explicit details or showed anyone the photos, but I shared enough. Hints, whispers, a casual mention. I'm worried about Becky. She's spending so much time with Jerry. You know Jerry, right? People talk. They always do. Our friends started to piece things together. Becky must have sensed it, because she suddenly found potlucks chilly. People would glance at her, then look away. She tried to sit next to our old friend Karen after Sunday service, and Karen got up and moved. One day, Becky cornered me in the hallway. She looked pale, eyes rimmed with red. "Michael, please, I can explain." I let out a flat laugh. "Explain what?" She took a breath. "Nothing is how it looks, I swear. It was just." I cut her off. "Stop." My voice was calm, eerily so. "I know everything, Becky. About you, Jerry, the pictures, the test. Don't treat me like a fool." She swallowed. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry." "Mistake," I repeated. The word felt sour on my tongue. I think that's when my voice nearly broke, but I forced the tremor down. Time kept marching, indifferent. She waited for me to lash out, to scream. But I just walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. It's strange how the absence of a reaction can sometimes hurt more than yelling. Becky started walking on eggshells around me. At night, she'd lie awake on her side of the bed. I pretended to sleep. Sometimes I'd hear her quiet sobs. A part of me ached to comfort her, my own wife after all. But then I'd recall that purple sundress, the pictures, and her messages to Jerry. The ache turned to ice. Meanwhile, the rumor mill churned. Our neighbor Anita, who never missed a chance to gossip, managed to pass the story around. At church, the once friendly nods and "How are you, hon?" turned into polite half-smiles or awkward stares whenever Becky was alone. She tried calling friends, but they were suddenly unavailable. The betrayal she'd inflicted on me extended to them too. People took sides, or at least they chose distance. And I let it happen. I never told them to back off. I simply walked around with a hollow look, and that alone fueled the talk. Becky was left alone in her corner at church suppers, her phone lighting up with calls nobody answered on the other end. She'd glance at me sometimes, eyes pleading, like I held the detonator to blow her life to bits. But I never pushed the button. I turned my energy to quiet vengeance. I scheduled a secret DNA test behind Becky's back, using a discreet mail-in kit. The result came within 2 weeks. I opened it alone in the living room, the morning sunlight creeping across the floor. My hand shook as I read the lines. Probability of paternity, 0%. A final hammer blow. She wasn't my daughter. Becky knew it. She just never confessed. Time battered me with the final truth. All those afternoons playing catch with her in the yard, the bedtime stories, the times I combed her hair and told her it was the same color as Becky's mother. All half-lies, but it wasn't her fault, I told myself. The child was innocent in all this. She was just as betrayed by Becky as I was. That's when the hollow guilt nearly overwhelmed me. I felt guilty for not noticing, for letting it happen, for loving a child that wasn't mine, and now wanting to run from that heartbreak altogether. I never confronted Becky directly about the test. Didn't need to. She saw the letter in my hand one morning and her face went ashen. I walked past her, tossed it in a drawer, and never said a word. We moved in silent circles around each other, the entire house weighed down by the tension. If it had been any heavier, the roof would have caved in. The next big scene, a potluck at the church. I didn't really want to go, but habit forced me to keep up appearances. I arrived with Becky, though we barely exchanged words in the car. Inside, the hall smelled of fried chicken, green bean casserole, and too many pies. Old ladies from the congregation offered me polite greetings, avoiding Becky's eyes. She managed a nervous smile, like she was trying to pretend everything was fine. Then she tried to help set up tables. People steered clear, uncertain how to handle her presence. I hovered, feeling that same distance from my own skin, like I was an observer behind glass. At one point, Becky approached me near the dessert table. "Michael," she said, voice trembling, "can we please talk?" She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "Not here," I muttered, glancing around. A few folks were watching, whispering. Her eyes shone with tears. "Then at home. Please, we can't keep living like this." I gave a tiny shrug. "We already are." Then I turned to greet an acquaintance, effectively shutting her out. She exhaled sharply, wiping her eyes, and walked off. That was the last time she tried to speak to me in public. The rest of the potluck, we circled each other at opposite ends of the hall. People parted for us like we carried a contagious disease. By the time we got home, Becky went straight to the bathroom, slammed the door. I heard sobbing from behind it. I just sat in the living room, picking at a stain on the couch fabric, mind drifting to God knows where. But the final straw, the day I decided to vanish from her life, came a week later. I'd taken another one of my long walks, no destination, just letting the miles slip under my feet. When I got home, the house was dim and quiet. I found Becky sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in hand. She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, and said in a shaky voice, "It's over with Jerry." I listened, heart thudding. She sniffled. I told him we just can't do this anymore. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. I was lonely, I was lost, but I want to fix us, Michael. I'll do anything. Her voice broke, but she kept talking, tears slipping down her face. "I still love you, and I want you to love me back." She rose from the chair, took a step toward me. "Please." The strangest thing happened. My chest filled with a hollow ache, but there was no anger left. Only emptiness, cold as a winter wind. I thought about all the times I tried to talk to her over the years, about the slow drift that had become an ocean between us. She'd never admitted to anything, never once tried to fix what was broken, until she got cornered. She wanted to patch the cracks now, after everything was rubble. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just let out a quiet breath and walked past her, heading upstairs. I heard her call my name, voice quivering like a frayed thread about to snap. The front door closed behind me minutes later. I was calm, too calm. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Door, darkness, another space. My next few days were spent methodically preparing for my exit. I rented a small storage unit in a neighboring town, moved personal items there bit by bit. Old baseball trophies, photo albums, my father's watch collection, spare clothes. Becky never noticed or asked where I went. She spent most of her time in a numb haze, it seemed, eyes red from crying, shoulders hunched in shame. Or maybe she knew what was coming but didn't know how to stop it. Finally, on a humid Tuesday night, I packed the last bag while Becky was at some church meeting, probably hoping to salvage what remained of her social standing. I left my wedding ring on the dresser, a silent statement. I took one last look around the bedroom, remembering the day we moved in, how happy we were. Then I slid out the door. I drove through the night, not caring where I'd land. Anywhere but there. Time kept marching, the headlights carving out a tunnel in the darkness. I realized I was shaking, adrenaline thrumming through my veins. I pulled off at a rest stop, sat in the car for a while. No tears came, just a quiet sense of finality. By morning, I'd rented a cheap month-to-month apartment on the far side of town. I texted Becky one line, "I'm gone." I turned off my phone. The relief that surged through me was terrifying. I'd effectively detonated my marriage, but the alternative was suffocating. I found out later, from a friend, that Becky arrived home that night. found the closets empty, the drawers cleared out, and realized the house itself was silent. No note, no extended confrontation. Just vacancy. She spent hours calling me, calling our daughter, calling Jerry, calling anyone who might know where I was. But I refused to pick up. Weeks passed. People asked me, "Are you okay?" I gave standard answers. "I'm fine," or "I'm dealing with it." Some tried to pry, to get the juicy details. I never offered them. I let them form their own conclusions from whatever Becky told them, or from the rumors swirling around. For the most part, folks left me alone. Part of me appreciated the distance. Part of me hated that I was alone. I saw Jerry once, outside a hardware store. He was loading lumber into the back of his pickup truck. I recognized that truck bed from the photos that haunted my dreams. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a moment, I wanted to stride over, tackle him to the ground, let out months' worth of fury. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there watching him, feeling a hollow sense of disgust. He glanced my way, locked eyes. A flicker of fear flashed across his face. Then he went back to loading up. Maybe he knew I was dangerous in that moment. Maybe he didn't care. I left before he could speak. The shaky adrenaline followed me all the way home. Or rather, to my sad little studio apartment. I let the door close behind me, dropped onto the couch, stared at the ceiling fan turning in slow circles. That was my new life. Distant, numb, a series of nights lying awake, replaying everything in my mind. The final puzzle piece was understanding that time. My old enemy had become an ally in a twisted way. Because day by day, the memories grew a little less sharp. The images of Becky and Jerry no longer stabbed me every second, just every other second, then every few minutes. The rest of our story is mostly silence. Becky still calls sometimes. I haven't blocked her number, but I rarely answer. When I do, it's short. "Michael, can we talk? I'm busy. Please, I need." Click. She tries to text, asking if I'm okay. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say. As for my daughter, no, Becky's daughter, I wrestled with how to handle that. We were close, me and that girl. I loved her. Maybe I still do. But every time I think of her, I'm slammed with betrayal, heartbreak, and that gnawing question. What does fatherhood really mean when you're not the biological dad? For now, I've retreated, which might make me a coward. Or maybe it's self-preservation. I tell myself time will sort it out. I know Becky is still in that house, living with the echoes of our life. She might be waiting for an ending, a neat resolution, an apology or a fight. She's not going to get it. I gave up that desire for closure. The last time we spoke, about a week ago, she started in about how sorry she was, how lonely and desperate she'd been. I let out a bitter laugh. I told her that emptiness hurts worse than rage. Then I hung up. Door, darkness, another space. Sometimes, late at night, I stare at the walls in my apartment and remember the moment I slammed my fist into that drywall. The sound, the feel. It was the instant I learned the truth about Becky and Jerry. One glance, and everything changed forever. If time is an enemy, then maybe I let it win. I let it wear us down until Becky sought comfort elsewhere. But the longer I look back, the more I see a different perspective. Time didn't kill us. Lies did. The same lies that we used as a crutch to avoid what was broken in our marriage. Our relationship wasn't undone by one betrayal. It was undone by 1,000 small moments of not talking, not touching, not trying. I guess, in a sense, I'm partially responsible, but not in the way Becky implied. My guilt is real, though not for what she thinks. I feel guilty for letting the cracks form, for being so certain that steady was enough. But it wasn't me who stepped out. That's on her. It doesn't stop the ache, the confusion, or the regret. But it's the truth. I used to think that rage was the worst emotion a man could feel. Now I know better. Cold emptiness is far worse. Because it's a pit so deep, You're not sure if you'll ever find the bottom. And maybe you don't. You just keep falling until you decide to stop. Tonight, I'm alone again. Same couch, same dim lamp flickering near the kitchenette. My phone vibrates. Another call from Becky. I pick up, not sure why. Maybe a part of me wants to see if she's changed or if I have. Hello, I say, my voice sounding scratchy. She's silent for a heartbeat. I hear her unsteady breathing. Michael, she begins. It's late. I say, what do you want? Her voice wavers. Just to hear your voice. I close my eyes, the swirl of heartbreak and anger rising in my chest. For a second, I think about calling her every name under the sun, cursing her for what she did, demanding an apology that will never fix anything. Instead, I exhale. Good night, Becky. I hang up. Click. Time marches on. 3 days later, I find myself rummaging through boxes in the storage unit. The smell of cardboard and dust clings to the air. My father's watch rests on top of a photo album, the one from my wedding day. I pick up the album, turn a few pages. Becky in her white dress, me in my only suit, the grin on my face so wide it nearly splits my cheeks. The memory hits me like a sledgehammer. Part of me wants to tear the page out, shred it, but I don't. Instead, I slip the album into a bag. Time can't be undone, no matter how many pages we rip out. On my way out, the storage unit's overhead light flickers, casting quick shadows on the concrete. It reminds me of a projector in an old movie theater, shifting scenes. Door, darkness, another space. That's my life now. Each transition a jarring cut, a new location where I try to piece myself back together. I place the bag in my car, lean against the trunk, watch the horizon. The sun is setting, the sky a blaze of orange and pink. My chest feels a little less tight than it did a month ago. I still don't have answers about what comes next, but I do feel more certain that I can keep moving, step by step, day by day. Maybe that's all we can do after we've been shattered. Try to gather enough pieces to form something new. Time passes. Each day, I sense my old self returning. A friend invited me for a fishing trip next weekend. I said yes. I actually look forward to it, something I haven't felt in a long time. Becky lingers in my thoughts, sure. The memory of her face when I walked away, the tears, the regret, those details remain etched in my mind. But they don't dominate me the way they did. The numb guilt recedes, replaced by acceptance. A new kind of calm that isn't entirely bleak. I still remember the day I found that folder on her laptop. That single glance that tore open my life and threw me into a world of betrayal and heartbreak. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something different, if I could have fought harder for us before it all collapsed. But then I recall her messages to Jerry, her easy lies, and I realized that I was fighting alone for a marriage that was already gone. What does life look like on the other side of betrayal? Right now, it looks like a small apartment with mismatched furniture, the hum of the fridge filling the silence, and a future I'm not sure I trust. But at least it's real. It's mine. No more illusions. Tonight, I walked outside into the cool air, a bottle of beer in my hand, and leaned on the railing by the parking lot. The streetlights buzzed overhead, a couple of moths circling. Over in the distance, I could see the faint glow of headlights on the highway. My phone was in my pocket, silent. No calls from Becky today. I realized how empty that felt, and how freeing. People often say that time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't do the healing. It just keeps going. You either sink or swim, mend or break. But you have to choose. So maybe time isn't the enemy after all. Maybe it's the test, the measure of whether you can carry the weight of what happened and still keep moving. I sipped my beer, tasted the bitterness, felt the cold glass against my palm. The sky overhead was studded with stars, and I found a tiny, fragile spark of hope flickering in my chest. Time may have battered me, but I'm still here, still breathing. And maybe in the long run, That's enough. For now, anyway. And so this is it. My story. I don't think it has a neat ending, not in the usual sense. There's no grand confrontation where I throw Becky's laptop in Jerry's face or scream about the injustice of it all. No dramatic showdown in the middle of the street. Instead, there's just the quiet departure, the cold emptiness, the faint sense of guilt for failing to see it coming, and the knowledge that Becky sits alone in our old house, waiting for me to bring closure that I've withheld. I won't, because maybe no one gets closure in real life. We just learn to live with the scars and move forward. Even betrayal can lose its sting with enough distance, though it leaves a dull ache that never quite goes away. Time, ironically, might be my biggest ally now, letting me separate who I am from what happened to me. The day I discovered Becky's affair, I thought that moment was the end. Maybe it was. But endings have a funny way of breeding new beginnings. Sometimes we have to let everything collapse so we can figure out what we're really made of. So, if anyone asks whether I got my revenge, I'd say yes and no. Becky is shunned by most of our friends, trapped in a lonely house, seeing my empty closet every time she walks by. Jerry's got his own guilt to carry, or maybe he feels nothing. I can't pretend to know what goes on in his head. As for me, I'm moving on, or trying to. My vengeance was silence, leaving her alone with the echoes. Some might call that cruel, but to me, it was the only way. Because sometimes, the worst punishment isn't fury or violence. It's emptiness, a void where affection used to be, a blank space where your life partner once stood. If Becky truly regrets what she's done, she'll live with that hollow space as long as it takes. Maybe it will wake her up, or maybe she'll wallow. Either way, it's no longer my problem. I take one last swig from the bottle, set it down on the railing. The sky's dark now, scattered with stars I can only partly see. Cars pass on the highway, but I barely notice the sound. My breath catches, but I keep breathing. My heart's battered, but it still beats, and tomorrow is another day. I head back inside. Door, darkness, another space. Close the door behind me. Turn off the light. Exhale. This is it.